Ray, it's good to see you, and welcome to Short, Sharp, and Succinct today. Ray, briefly, how did you come to faith in Christ?
I do believe that the build up to salvation is a process which might go on for a very long time in people's lives. And I can remember as quite a young child, sort of thinking about, I can remember as a 4-year-old running up to me mum once, having just frightened myself to death, thinking about eternity. How big is the universe and what happens when you die, sort of thing. And I remember sort of jumping on mum's lap. And she said, "What's up with you?" And I just said, "Well, I'm hungry. Can I have something, please?" Because you don't want to talk about this sort of stuff. I was what you would call a hyperactive child. And so it wasn't that they believed they sent me to Sunday school. It's that they wanted a couple of hours off from me on a Sunday. So they used to pack me off to a church, which I didn't want to go to. And this was the Good Shepherd in Collier Row. And well, I decided I didn't want to go, but every time I didn't go, they would drag me round there. So I figured out that I needed to do something so that the church wouldn't have me back. And so we used to keep little white mice, and used to breed them and what have you. So I took some to church one Sunday and let them go, you see. And there was all these ladies sort of hiking up their skirts, and that had the desired effect. They threw me out of that one there. But trouble is, my parents found another church they would send me off to on a Sunday. And now they started locking up the mice on Sunday, so I wouldn't take them to church anymore. But I noticed that if you went to church early, you'd get the seat you want. So I remember taking some glue and putting glue on the seats, you see. So when the ladies sat down, everything was great till they said, "Let us rise," and they stood up, and there was seats attached to their backsides, So they threw me out of that church, you see. By this time, my parents had given up on me. So I drifted off, and they let me get up to what I wanted to get up to by and large, you see. And I got into all sorts of strange things. But a friend of mine, I mean, we were shockers. They were building these blocks of flats down the road from us. They were 14-story blocks of flats, so the tower crane is even higher than that. And we got onto the site one night, and we were out on the jib, which was the very end of the crane where the bit goes up and down. And someone obviously rang the police, and we saw the police car coming up the road. They had a dog with them as well. But the problem the police have got is that we're now sort of right at the top of the 14-story blocks of flats. And because there's no electric in the place, so they've got to run up the steps, to get us. So while they're coming up the steps on the inside, we went down the scaffolding on the outside, and that's how we got away. My friend and I, we were into not just that, but we were into burglary and all the rest of it. Suddenly one day he changed, and I said, "Should we go and do that?" He said, "I don't want to do this anymore." You see, and I kept on at him, and I said, "What's happened?" He said, "Well," he said, "I went to church," and I'm like, "Oh, we would go." And he said, "I've become a Christian," and I remember saying to him, "Never mind, you'll get better," And he said, "No, no," and he didn't. And over a period of about 6 months, I noticed he didn't want to come back to what we were doing. And so he invited me to a church party. I said, "No, I don't want to go to that." And he tried. And eventually, I mean, sometimes the Bible talks about being wise, doesn't it, in things, and sharp as, was it, why, was it as harmless as doves, but sharp as serpents and all the rest of it. So my friend said to me, he said, "There's a nice looking redhead. Do you want to come to this party?" So, I sucker took the bait and off I went, to this party. I was a disaster at this party. I mean, I really was a nightmare, sort of playing lumberjacks with the Christmas tree and this sort of thing, And, but I noticed there was something different about these people. There was something different. And I wanted to know more about that. And so I carried on going along. I was 14 when I come to Christ. It was Easter. And I remember the pastor preaching, and I hadn't the foggiest idea what I was doing. I just thought I need to do something. And that night he led me to Christ, a guy called Len Thurgood. And that is how I come to Christ, because my friend changed. And I noticed that there was something different about the people who he was now involved with. and I wanted what they had. And so that's the short version. I can tell you about the court cases and all the rest of it, but we won't go into that.
Well, Ray, I can see that the Lord has had his hand and got his hand on you and your friend as well. Brilliant testimony there. And it shows you what the Lord can do in other people's lives as well. So what circumstance or event would you say has helped to shape your life?
I've always had one of these sort of inquiring minds. Sometimes people say, well, that is how it is. Or, you do it because I've told you to do it. And I've always thought, why? I've always had that inquiring kind of mind. My trade is actually an electrical traction and diesel traction engineer. So I used to repair and overhaul the electric trains that ran out of Liverpool Street and Fenchurch Street. And we worked on the overheads and the inputs and stuff like that. I mean, that is interesting in itself,
Yes.
And nothing like wandering around where you've got 25,000 volt inputs and stuff like this, This is why we have to learn when it's the same with God, isn't it? Sometimes God says, thou shalt not. And sometimes I think it's right to say, well, why does God say that? But also we need to respect that he said it,
Of course we do.
It's like there's big signs around the substations I used to go in that used to say danger. And if you're not careful, you think, oh, well, I'm okay. But why has that been put there? Perhaps someone knows something you don't. So you learn to respect things. So certainly things like learning how to learn was a bit of an eye-opener to me. And this whole arena of an inquiring mind as to why things do what they do. And so that kind of thing has been a driving thing in my life.
Great point there. So what do you feel the Lord has been teaching you personally of late?
Very much in around this whole area of the still small voice.
Okay.
That if we're not careful, we can busy ourselves and miss out. I had an amusing incident the other week. We were with the grandchildren up in Newcastle. The little grandson Elliot, he loves cheesecake, you see, but getting him to eat his dinner is a nightmare. I don't know, and I'm quite sure there'll be parents sitting there going, oh yeah, we know that one,
Yes, I'm sure.
It's like
I was one of those children.
That's right. Eat your peas. He's more inclined to shove him up his nose than he is to eat them, sort of thing, And anyway, they'd got him to eat as much of his dinner as he would eat, you see. And he said, I can't eat anymore. I'm completely full up. No, I can't possibly eat anymore. And they said, well, you mean that there won't be any sweet? No, I can't. I'm full up. I don't want to eat anymore. So they said, okay. So we went off into another room, you see. And my son said to our daughter-in-law, Isha, he said, shall we have the cheesecake now? Now, Elliot absolutely loves cheesecake. All of a sudden, we heard these patter of feet. He come running around the corner and like, cheesecake, sort of thing, And to him, that would have been a still small voice because I hardly heard it across the table, but he heard it in the other room. And it's like tuning your voice, tuning your ears. I mean, it was Elijah, wasn't
Elijah.
He was in that cave. He was depressed.
Yes.
All right. He'd had this great battle and he was having a mental cry moment, wasn't he? And he's there. And it's remarkable. Sometimes God doesn't actually say or do anything when you're in that state. All he did was he fed him and watered him. If you look at it. Yeah. Have you ever tried getting something away from a raven that it doesn't want to give up? I mean, God's ravens are showing up and feeding him. This is a miraculous. I mean, you've only got to go to the Tower of London and realise they'll nick your sandwiches.
Definitely.
But to actually get a raven to give up its food to you, I mean, this is a remarkable act of God, going on. And then there was the whirlwind, the earth, fire, and so on going outside, and that didn't impress him. You see, it just didn't get his attention. The razzmatazz didn't get his attention, but the still small voice did. And there are occasions when, if we're not careful, we get caught up in the razzmatazz of stuff. And in church, like, we need some. It's like we want the clouds to peel back and a hand to come down or something. But we need the still small voice. And I'm learning all the time to hear that that little voice. This is the way. Just go walk in it this way. And that is something you're learning all the time. If not, you just get too busy and you miss everything, can't you?
Yeah, that is so true, Ray. Very true. We do need to cultivate and go to a quiet place so that we can spend time with the Lord and hear his still small voice, for sure. So, in what ways are you active in God's work, would you say?
Well, I'm still preaching, although that's by way of invitation. I just felt God say to me when I retired, don't you go pursuing this, I will open doors for you. And so I'm also involved with mentoring a minister in training. In my church, we've got a pensioner leading the worship there. That's me. So, I'm still doing that. And there's practical stuff which you're doing all the time. I'm still pastoring. You get phone calls and you go and visit people.
And what role does prayer take in your daily life?
Well, it's a vital area. Prayer is it's a conversation between you and God. It's very easy to show up with a shopping list, isn't it?
Oh, yes, yes.
It's very easy there. But Paul said that rejoice always and pray without ceasing. And so sometimes, there are times which you have sat down and you've just spent time conversing with God. It talks about God met with Adam in the garden in the cool of the day. And, you get, sometimes I like to use my imagination. It's like Adam is just discovering things and I can see him running up to God. Oh, did you know? Well, of course he knew. But it's like any child running up to dad having just made a discovery. Dad knew it all the time. And that simpleness, like a child, just going up to your father and just talking with him, and also having ears to hear what he says. The Bible talks about he who has an ear, let him hear. And we have to have ears to hear what he's saying. And that comes from a simple conversation each day.
Yeah, and that conjures up such a lovely picture there, doesn't it, with Adam in the garden, like you say. So, Ray, can I say thank you for part one of Short, Sharp and Succinct. And I look forward to interviewing you next week. Thank you, Ray.